This is the bonus section podcast, episode number 34. How do you know what they're thinking? Are you the type of person that knows you were meant for something greater in this lifetime and that somewhere inside of you there's a bigger version of yourself just trying to break through? But in spite of all that diligent self-development, you just can't seem to find the way up? Well, then you're definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the bonus section and the host of this podcast, and a person just like you trying to learn how to live the most fulfilling life possible. Now, to help you take immediate action to get moving in a better direction, we take all the notes from each episode and post them at freethinkingtools.com. Now, in this episode, this is a real problem for us all. And I'm challenging you with the question, how do you know what other people are thinking? And you know what I mean. You've done that, haven't you? I do it, you do it, we all do it. We try to pretend we know what somebody's thinking. And it's usually when we start to get anxious or fearful or we're begging for a fight or there's family tension or there's tension in a relationship. We make a presumption that we know what somebody else is thinking. But let me give you a couple of provocative thoughts here to deal with this. And it's something I've thought deeply about recently in a lot of contexts, but especially my business. It's why do we think we're mind readers, right? Why do we think that way? Because really what happens is we're really seeing some tacit or light or circumstantial evidence. We see with our eyes, actions. We read a text. We see an email. We see something and we make this, by the way, it's a cognitive distortion. I just love that concept of cognitive distortions, being aware of it. My sister made me aware of it. She's a special needs teacher. She said you should study cognitive distortions and how they affect us. And you could Google a list of cognitive distortions and there are things like over-exaggeration. That's a cognitive distortion. And that's really what happens here. All or nothing thinking. That's another one. So imagine you're trying to read somebody's mind, or you're not even thinking that way, by the way. You're watching what they do. And like I said, I mean, you think about something like a cell phone, right? All of a sudden, you have this cell phone and somebody texts you something. And all of a sudden, what? You're an expert at mind reading now because you can read 5 words and you make an assumption about tone. And then the next thing that you know, you're over-exaggerating, or it's all or nothing. Oh my gosh, they said this. That means that I can't get the job. That means that they don't like me. That's what a cognitive distortion does. It takes the small circumstantial evidence and it runs wild with it, and usually in a very negative way. Now, there is the delusional on the positive side. I mean, it's a double-edged, sword where you look at it and you say, oh my gosh, that means they really like me. No, it doesn't mean that either. So again, what we have in front of us, and I have one of my sons has a tutor right now that I really like his advice. He said, look, you're looking inside for so much information that you're getting stuck and confused. And instead of using your eyes to look outward and just see what's in front of you, what does it say? And just take it at its face value. See, we have this complex machine in our head that is also emotional. So when it sees things, we trigger some emotions, and that can trigger these cognitive distortions of over-exaggeration or all or nothing thinking. We just accelerate. When the truth is, what do I see in front of me? And let me just think about what it says. Now, let me go to the next point here. Where does that leave us if we just see what's right in front of us? And I ask myself another question here. Well, how do we expect to know what other people are thinking when we're mostly unaware of our own thinking? So let's go back to point number 1. If we look outwardly at the text, the email, the one-liner, the action steps, if we look at it and then all of a sudden we're not aware of how we're feeling, I think that's the first point to stop. There's a beat there where if instead of, and this is very difficult, as you know, these triggers, these words, these things that happen, trigger emotions. Something right before this podcast happened to me and my heart sunk, right? For somebody else. I mean, their delusion about what they're trying to achieve, my heart just sunk. But I have to take a beat because what I'm going to say is going to be emotionally driven. And I just have to say, okay, what's in front of me? What's the problem? Can I give advice to that person on how to solve that problem? So I had to become aware that my first reaction was in my head. So instead of trying to read somebody else's mind, I started to read my own by simply being conscious of what am I thinking while I'm feeling this way. Instead of just feeling and going blind and then starting to type something that's all emotion and no logic, let me just get it out on the table. Okay, how did that text, that update, those action steps make me feel? So I just pull it out. I make myself cognizant of what really is in front of me. And I read my own mind out loud. So I ask myself, what am I thinking? That provokes me to think outwardly and consciously, not emotionally and subconsciously, right? Because all of a sudden, sometimes subconscious takes over and you're freaked out by something. You're afraid, you're mad, whatever. Next thing you know, you don't even know how you drove home. So that's my point. We're not even conscious of what's going on as these cognitive distortions are getting accelerated. So just bring it out there. I mean, why are we trying to read somebody else's mind when we won't even read our own first? And that means just get it out. Okay, so let's go to the next point here. Real mind readers. Let's go back to not just asking ourselves, but let's go back to the person that's in front of you or the situation. Real good mind readers ask first. That's what they do. I mean, if you ever want to get a test, go in and have your palm read somewhere or your future told. Go in there and watch the technique that these pros use. They ask you provocative questions. They're incredible observers of what, I know some of you are going to argue with me. Oh, but they can really, okay, great. Whatever you want to believe. Some people maybe really are tapped into the ether in all the ideas that are there. I've never met anybody like that, but maybe you have. But I'm going to tell you, let's just take the average Jane or Joe palm reader. They're going to ask you some questions first. They're going to listen very closely second. And then they're going to react third. And what you don't even realize on their reaction time is they're actually asking more questions. Even though they sound like statements, they're provoking you into conversation so that you will do what? Read your own mind out loud. And suddenly you look at them and say, how did you do that? You did it. You read your mind aloud, so they know what you're thinking. They know what's going on in your life. Then they can make some assumptions and presumptions based on real fact that you gave them. See, maybe we all need to be having a little bit more practice around the crystal ball, okay? Because when you ask first, listen second, react third, it's amazing what you're learning about the situation and what you can do it, okay? So let me go to the fourth point here. When we stop assuming what people are thinking, we're able to stay more logical, practical, and become more effective. So, if we become cognizant of this back and forth about mind reading, what does it do for us? How does that become a thinking tool? You know where I'm at, freethinkingtools.com, right? This is to provoke us to think and walk away with a tool bag so that we can use this in practical situations. So, you see, let's go to any situation where we might be thinking about this person who has texted this, emailed this, or done something. And we get into the emotional reactive state, and we're not conscious of really what we're thinking. What's going on in my mind is not conscious. By the way, it would be an awesome exercise if we walked around with a pen and a yellow pad of paper and we just wrote these thoughts down as we get emotional. It'd be great. A little difficult to do, but it would be great because it's coming out of your head, through your arm, in your hand, through the pencil, onto the paper, and there it is. And you can see your own mind being read aloud onto a piece of paper. And what that tool does for you, by the way, you can definitely do that. Definitely. I mean, lock yourself down, and when you're journaling at night and you're stressed out, especially if you're out there stressed out listening to this, get that stuff out of your head because you're not really thinking. You're just feeling, and it's just a mishmash of stuff. And it's all these cognitive distractions are just really a mess. So when you get it down on a piece of paper, it almost forces that academic or logical way that we're capable of behaving. See, it's very logical to say, I'm going to take some notes. I'm going to think onto a piece of paper. Artists do it all the time. They get it out, and there it is. And then it's up on the easel, and they can see it logically, practically. I mean, again, I'm not going to be a weird spot to go with a creative like that, because a creative might not care to sell this, but let's just pretend they are an artist that makes a living that way, and they're looking up at the easel and they all of a sudden see this thing and they're thinking to themselves, well, I haven't sold anything like this before, and the audience doesn't that's not really what they've been buying from me lately. Yeah, so maybe this is just an act of personal expression here today. You see what I mean? It just brings even the most creative brain to a logical, practical site, and then we can become more effective. And in that case, the artist becomes effective to the extent that they produce a piece of art that's sellable, and they can thereby make their living doing this art. And I think that's a really important application. Let's go to an application of a marriage that's under pressure, a partnership that's under pressure. And we think to ourselves, let me write down what I'm thinking. And let me then kind of cross out the things that are clearly just emotional or cognitive distortions. Let me get to the heart of the matter. Okay, well, here's the thing. I'm not even mad about the thing that's happening right now. It's something that happened 6 months ago, 6 years ago, and it's there. And so practically and logically speaking, I've never dealt with that with my partner, with my spouse. There it is. It's right there in front of me. And I have to deal with that. And we put a big circle around it. Well, all of a sudden it becomes logical and practical to stare at that. Now, it might be a really big, difficult thing to bring that into that conversation and say, look, I just need to get this one point out on the table. 6 years ago, this thing happened and I never reconciled it, and it's bothering me, and I need to put it on the table as much as it's difficult. See, that's very logical. And so all the noise that when we go to therapy or we ask for help, oftentimes the therapist is just trying to let us get the noise out first, and blah, 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 off we go until finally we, for them, edit the issue. And then when a therapist can clearly identify the issue that is really bubbling up here, they can help you deal with it. So you see, it's this editing process where we go from these cognitive distortions and this noise, we chunk something up into the logical and practical by reading our mind aloud, and there it is. So you see, whether it's us trying to get it out on our side of this issue, or us being a good steward of that relationship and asking questions of the person who's there so we get the full, and look at it, it still might be an ugly situation. Why did you do this to me? And you get a nasty answer back. You have a real issue. I get it. But we have to stop just simply assuming we can read everybody's mind, because if we do only that side of it and we exacerbate these exaggerations, well, we are the problem. So let me go back and try to pull this together a little bit more slowly. It's a tough situation, but it came up and I wanted to get it out of my head and into a podcast here, because I see it everywhere. I see it in personal relationships, business, almost every week. And I feel it for myself. So here's the question on the table. How do you know what they're thinking? The answer is you don't. So it starts off with the first point. Well, why do we think that we're mind readers at all? We don't really think it, but why do we act like mind readers should be the first question, right? The next question is, how do we expect to know what other people are thinking when we're mostly unaware of our own thinking? So we're so caught up in not even being cognizant of what we're thinking. Why do you think we're reacting that way? And who are we to now assume we can read their minds when we can't even read our own aloud to ourselves? Next point is real mind readers, people that actually do it for a living, ask first. They listen attentively second. And then they react third. And I can make an argument that they keep asking questions, even though they're reacting, and they're very effective because they make you believe they can see into your soul and in your future and your past, whatever it is that they're doing. But it's just a really good technique for being good with somebody else, right? And the last point is when we stop assuming what people are thinking, we're able to stay more logical, more practical, and we actually become more effective that way in all sorts of situations. Let me summarize it this way. There's a natural tendency to assume we know what other people are thinking based on the actions we see them take. However, when we do this, we tend to fill in the blanks with our own assumptions, and they cause a filter that is often negative. And before you know it, we've created adversaries where there may not be any. See how we're the problem? The best solution, I think, is to start by asking people what they're thinking. Ask them. Shut up and listen. What's the answer? and how they're feeling even. Go deeper and say, how you feeling about something? Not just what are you thinking, how you feeling, and let them get it out. So that way, there's no assumption. It's being, you said, now remember, like a good therapist, if you ask that question of somebody, let them get the noise out first. Let them keep talking a little bit. Don't cut them off, and let them do their own self-editing so that hopefully the real issue comes out. So in turn, that way you can be more effective in producing more positive outcomes by resolving real issues rather than the made-up ones we make. All right, now remember, you can take more immediate action if you want to get started in the right direction by taking these notes that we're going to make from these episodes for you and post at freethinkingtools.com. Go over there. Any episode that you can match up, listen to it, sit down, just do some thinking. Thinking's healthy. And right next to me on my desk here, and I'll show it to you as I record this podcast, is a yellow legal pad and a pencil. Well, if you're listening, you can't see it, but you get it, right? And that is how I do this. I do this. I practice what I preach. I sit down and I think onto paper. And oftentimes I don't even go back and look at what I did. It's just that cathartic moment of getting it out. And that continues to refine what's important to me in my subconscious so that all of those resources I need to get what I want or get the outcomes I want or attract the relationships I need in business and otherwise, that's how it happens, okay? It's a real authentic process. All right. Now, freethinkingtools.com will help you do that. Notes are already organized for you. Also, don't forget you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen so that you don't miss out on any insights each time we upload an episode. We also post all these episodes on our social media channels. So remember to turn on your notifications for the bonus section and you won't miss the reminders. We'd also appreciate it, of course, if you would share our content with other people just like you, so that they can get some of the help and provocation to think that they need. And you'll help us and join us in this mission of trying to be people for others. Let's spread the good word. Also, thanks for listening. But remember this, please, nobody is coming for you. So go get to work on a plan for your own life. And I'll see you in the next episode to help you do so.